Thanks for praying. We're going to turn this morning to a book that doesn't get visited very often, I don't think, in church, but has a lot of tremendous truth in it. Ecclesiastes 11, the reading is on page 1047. And as we have read through Ecclesiastes in the past, we find out that it's a very serious book. But this morning, we're going to find out that it's about serious subjects in a kind of humorous way. And a little bit of humor helps to mitigate some of the seriousness of life, doesn't it? In fact, we're going to be talking today about aging and what the writer of Ecclesiastes has to say about getting older. There are some people who have expressed some classic one-liners about aging. The first is Andy Rooney. When you hear the quote, you'll recognize it as Andy Rooney right away. I've learned that life is like a roll of toilet paper. The closer you get to the end, the faster it goes. Will Rogers said, when you are dissatisfied and want to go back to youth, think of algebra. Phyllis Diller said, I'm at an age when my back goes out more often than I do. George Burns, the comedian, said a couple things. He said of one fellow, he's so old that when he orders a 3-minute egg, they ask for the money up front. He felt he was so old, and actually he was. He says, when I was a boy, the Dead Sea was only sick. Woody Allen wrote, you can live to be 100 if you give up all the things that make you want to live to be 100. And an anonymous person said, regular naps prevent old age, especially if you take them while driving. Let's turn to chapter 11, starting with verse 7, where the preacher writes, light is sweet, and it pleases the eyes to see the sun. However many years a man may live, let him enjoy them all. But let him remember the days of darkness, for they will be many. Everything to come is meaningless. Be happy, young man, while you are young. Let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Follow the ways of your heart and whatever your eyes see. For know that all these things God will bring you to judgment. So then, banish anxiety from your heart and cast off the troubles from your body, for youth and vigor are meaningless. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come, and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark, and the clouds return after the rain. When the keepers of the house tremble, and the strong men stoop, when the grinders cease because they are few, and looking through the windows grow dim. When the doors to the street are closed, and the sound of the grinding fades. When men rise up at the sound of birds, but all their songs grow faint. When men are afraid of heights and of dangers in the streets. When the almond tree blossoms and the grasshopper drags himself along and desire is no longer stirred. Then man goes to his eternal home and mourners go about the streets. Remember him before the silver cord is severed or the golden bowl is broken, before the pitcher is shattered at the spring or the wheel broken at the well, and the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Meaningless says the teacher, everything is meaningless. Let's come to understand this Word of God, and I want to draw your attention in the message notes to the summary statement. It's in bold print, and it says, God gives joy and trials at every stage of life. Joy is a gift, but the ironic thing is it's something that we're to seek, something that we're to pursue. The writer of Ecclesiastes, who identifies himself only as the preacher, wants us to understand that it's not enough to just wait for joy to fall on you, but you need to put some effort and intention into it to seek joy. But we also need to acknowledge the other half of that sentence, that trials are also going to come. They are also gifts from God. And though they hurt us in varying degrees, they are also rich resources, deep wells from which we can draw to mature and mature graciously. Our aim, friends, is not simply to grow old, but to mature as we age. To help with that line, I want us to take a look at this book and see what the author claims about aging and see if this statement is true. First of 3 points, let all ages enjoy life. Look at verses 7 and 8. Now, given the weather we've had over the last week, I think we can all appreciate on an emotional level this first statement. Life is sweet. It's been kind of lacking over the last few days, hasn't it? It's known in medical science that being deprived of the sun causes low energy and depression. And so it's human nature to say it pleases the eye to see the sun. And if you could look outside like I'm looking outside right now, your eye would be pleased. Thank you, Lord. In these verses, the author contrasts light and darkness. And it's a contrast that teaches us about joy and sorrow. In this life, we have both light and darkness. We also have joy and sorrow. Now, the preacher's perspective is a little wistful. He looks back at his youth and he observes all of the things that have been taken from him. And so we experience in life, I think, not a loss, but a transfer. Things in life are transferred from the predominantly material and physical. As we mature, they become more emotional and spiritual. And we haven't lost anything. It's simply been put on the other side of the ledger of life. Now, verse 8 is a mix of good and bad news. And when you're dealing with the preacher in Ecclesiastes, it's going to be mostly bad news. It's going to sound worse than it is. The good news is that all ages are called to joy. That's good news. All of us in this room are called to be joyous people. Now, the bad news is that interspersed in that joy, there are going to be days of darkness. And if we remember this, that helps us to keep our life in balance. We shouldn't expect that all of life will be joy. We shouldn't expect that everything will be easy or automatic. Our pursuit of joy is not to consume every conscious thought. It is not supposed to take us down the paths of evil or selfishness. But the preacher didn't say just days of darkness, did he? He said there will be many days of darkness. So be ready. Be prepared. That's a warning. That's not pessimism. It's realism. But the point and counterpoint between light and darkness reminds us also that we are called to be temperate, that we need to have an even temper and approach the moments of joy and sorrow and try to leaven them out, balance them in our lives. So the first point that the preacher is making here is that all ages can enjoy life. The The second point he wants us to make here is that the young are to be happy, but mindful that life ends with judgment. Now, he directs this comment at young people, but it really is good for all ages as well, isn't it? And he lists 5 reasons for us to be happy and to enjoy our youthful years. And he says, very simply, be happy. Let your heart give you joy. Follow the ways of your heart. Banish anxiety from your heart. There's a lot of heart-healthy language there, isn't there? Now, he's not saying do whatever you want, whatever seems like fun, whatever suits you. What he's saying is build up some memories. Have some joyous experiences so that on the dark days you can remember these and be lifted up. But then he makes a 5th thing, and this requires a little more explanation. He says, cast off the troubles of your body. And I think what he's saying here is, don't let an infirmity of the body keep you from having a high-flying spirit or an expanding understanding of the world. Be ambitious, but be ambitious in ways that go around your physical limitations. And I've talked to lots of people in care facilities who feel they just don't have anything left to give because they can't get up, they can't get out. And I want to encourage them when I see them to pray. Become a prayer warrior. Be ambitious in that. If nothing else is available to you, pray. Pray hard. Pray frequently. We who are still out and about in this world need it desperately. Say, work within your ambitions. Cast off the troubles of your body. Then he gives us 3 things to keep in mind during the good times. And this, I think, is especially important for young people. He wants us all to realize that during the good times, when we're tempted to do things that are away from God, that are sinful, God will bring you to judgment. So isn't it humorous in a way that he says, young people, knock your socks off. Do whatever your heart tells you to do. But remember, God is going to call you to judgment. He's reminding us here that choices have consequences and that God does hold us accountable. Then he says also, youth and vigor are meaningless. What he means here is that optimism and vitality of youth do not by themselves create anything of eternal value. And the third caution he gives, chapter 12, verse 1, remember your Creator. And what he's saying to us here simply is, be grateful for your life. Don't abuse it. Don't give it up. God gave you life. 3 times in this passage and several times in the whole book, the preacher uses the word meaningless. He's telling us here that the things of the world are meaningless. We need to understand what he means by that word. The word meaningless literally means a fleeting breath. It's gone. Comes and goes in an instant. In the King James, it's translated as vanity because it's subject to frustration. What he's saying in that word is that it's not eternal. It's temporary. And it's subject to frustration because it is worldly, not heavenly. The preacher uses this word because it is his verdict on the things of this life. It is the sum of his experiences. And if it is Solomon who wrote these words, he had a pile of experiences. It is the conclusion of his thinking. So the preacher's point in using this term is that it's better to make progress in spirituality, especially when we are young, especially on the good days. because the days of darkness and days of infirmity or impairment will come and will need that spiritual maturity to weather those days. See what I mean? Prepare. It's hard to get young people especially to think of being old people. We don't tend to do that in our thinking. Prepare. Number 3. And this is where he gets into kind of a humorous way of describing this. He says, let the aged be remembered. He equates old age with the days of trouble. And he gives us 11 reasons why an aged person might call them days of darkness, or say of these times, I find no pleasure in them. You remember I said last week that humorous things in the Bible aren't obvious to us because of the difference between cultures. But in this section, the preacher is using figures of speech that are intended to be humorous descriptions of the troubles that can come with age. So, for example, number 1, in verses 2 and 3, we read, sun, light, moon, stars go dark, clouds return after the rain, and those looking through the windows grow dim. Here he's referring to a gradual loss of vision. Now, in our day and age, we've got optometrists who can take out cataracts and restore vision. We've got laser surgery, but of course, in the preacher's day, none of those things were available. And so a loss of vision was something that everyone could expect. Number 2, look at verse 3. The keepers of the house refer to one's legs, and they tremble. The strong men refer to one's arms, and they stoop. You know that in youth the muscle goes like this, and then later on. That's why I'm not taking off my coat to show you, because you know what I'm talking about. And so, along with age, weakness of limbs and stooping are stereotypes of the aged. The third example, grinders cease because they are few. This refers to the loss of teeth. And I've got a few grinders that are missing as well. So we know that that's a frequent occurrence, and especially in ancient times. The fourth example, the doors to the street are closed when one's eyesight is diminished and one's hearing is diminished. A person can feel left out of conversations and even become rather a recluse. That's certainly something that tends to go with age. Look at verse 4, the fifth example. The sound of grinding fades and songs of the birds grow faint. This is a gradual loss of hearing. And again, in our time, we have ways of correcting that. But in this time, it was a sign of age and universally expected. Number 6, also in verse 4, rise at the sound of birds. Have you ever used the expression up with the chickens? I think what this implies is a couple of things. One is the leftover habit of rising early. Though one is not working anymore, you get into the habit of rising at a certain hour and you keep that. It may also imply a problem with insomnia, which is more common among the aged than the young. Remember sleeping for 12, 14 hours at a crack? I remember, but I haven't done it in a long, long time. Look at verse 5. Afraid of heights and dangers in the streets. While people of all ages feel anxiety, it comes on with advanced age, and also in more serious situations. Unfounded fears, anxieties, and phobias can be symptoms of much more serious mental illnesses. Also in verse 5, the almond tree blossoms. You know what color almond tree blossoms are? They're white. Kind of like the white hair that comes with aging. Have you ever used the expression snow on the roof? He or she's got a little snow on the roof. Well, it's especially true today. The ninth example, the grasshopper drags himself along. Have you noticed that bugs get sluggish when the weather gets cold? I was working outdoors yesterday, came in, and there was a wasp riding on my head. And I didn't give him time to warm up indoors. Sent him on his way. So also in older folks can arthritis and similar ailments slow us down. The 10th example in verse 5, desire is no longer stirred. The passions of youth give way to a more deliberate and temperate nature as we mature. That's good news. And the last, the man goes to his eternal home and mourners go about the streets. This obviously refers to the end of life. And the culture of that day required extreme expressions of grief, loud wailing and crying. This was expected to go on for at least a week after the person was deceased. And so people who were more wealthy and wanted to get on with their busy lives would hire professional mourners. You can picture that. People they would pay to come and do the wailing and gnashing of teeth and crying for them. Now, in all of that, don't lose the point that the young are to remember the aged. And the word remember here means to attend to honor the aged, to help them in these infirmities. And the writer says, remember him before. And then he gives 6 quick word images of death. The silver cord is severed. The silver cord holds up the oil lamp. And if the cord is severed, the lamp falls down to the floor and is broken. And that's what it means when it says the golden bowl is shattered, because a broken oil lamp is no longer going to give any light. The pitcher is shattered. A broken pitcher is no use in carrying water. The wheel is broken. If the pulley used to draw water from the well breaks, it is of no use in getting water from the spring. And dust returns to ground, refers to the creation of Adam and the decomposition of things buried in the earth. So the preacher reflects on all of that, and he says, all of these things are temporary. These are parts of life that we endure. And the maturity that we achieve and the good works that we do, those are the only things that have meaning. The things that we receive from God, whether we like them or don't, the point is, are we using them to mature ourselves? God gives trials and joys at every stage of life. Now, friends, if we believe that God is in charge, we must accept this essential truth. The alternatives are to blame the devil for every bad thing that happens, and that's not biblical, and it makes the devil out to be more powerful than he is. If we say it's just random, then we drain the meaning and the hope from the experiences of life. And that's not biblical either. So when we understand that God is in charge, we understand that every experience has meaning. It has something that transcends the moment. Something that we can benefit in our maturity. If we believe God is in charge, we understand that everything is motivated by love and that it will work out for our good, not because of us, but because of God. If we believe anything else, we have indeed found life to be completely meaningless. So what are we to do based on what we have heard from the preacher today? We are to seek joy, but let sorrows come. We are to seek true joy, which is found in spiritual maturity. We are to not just grow old, but gracefully mature in Jesus Christ. May that be our hope. May we work together in this, young and old, to make it a reality. We're going to conclude our service today by acknowledging that Jesus is